Hello, Wanderers. I'm Hannah.
And I'm Jess.
And this is Wicked Wanderings. Today's episode, and our first episode,
Yay!
is about the disappearance of Maura Murray. So to give a little backstory on what this case is about, on February 9th, 2004, Maura Murray made her way up to Haverhill, New Hampshire from Umass and crashed her car along Country Road. She was last seen by a few neighboring houses, but when the police arrived, she was gone. There are many conspiracy theories surrounding the disappearance, but nothing can be verified until we figure out what happened to her. So let's do a little background on Maura. So Maura was born on May 4th, 1982. She was the fourth of 5 siblings, and there was Freddie Jr., Kathleen, Julie, and then her little brother, Kurt. Shortly after Kurt was born, Fred and Lori, which were Maura's parents, they separated. And according to James Renner's book, which the title is True Crime Addict, How I Lost Myself in the Mysterious Disappearance of Maura Murray, Fred was not Kurt's father. No one knows what happens behind closed doors, so I'm not throwing shade on anyone. Just want to give you guys some background on the Murray family. She was always an athletic person, but excelled in school in her hometown of Hanson, Massachusetts. She got a 1420 on her SAT, which I thought was pretty insane.
Sheesh.
I mean, considering my mom made me do my math one at least 3 times over. After high school, she and her sister Julie went to West Point, and she studied chemical engineering. She was there for a few semesters until some circumstances occurred, and she transferred to Umass for nursing.
Do we know what those circumstances are?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And those are upcoming.
Get to it.
On February 9th, 2004, Maura left Umass and drove up to New Hampshire, where her car crashed along the curve of Wild Ammonoosuc Road in Haverhill, New Hampshire.
I'm really proud of that pronunciation.
Thank you. I had to practice it. I feel like I already butchered it, so sorry to whoever lives on Wild Ammonoosuc Road. So I want to talk about the crash itself first, then get into the details of the months leading up to the crash, and then the investigation afterwards.
Okay.
So let's talk about the crash. The crash happened at approximately 7:27 p.m. on February 9, 2004, in her 1996 Saturn, which sounds like an old car, but it really wasn't in 2004. It was barely 10 years old, right?
Yeah.
So that's really not that old.
Quite.
So at that time, it's dark in February. She's on a windy back road. Snow is covering the landscape in New Hampshire, and probably not many streetlights either. It has been said she was drinking due to the alcohol found in the car and some empty bottles. So on top of these windy, dark back roads, she was most likely drinking. No cell service. And based on where her car was found, she was on Ammonoosuc Road going along the curve. And then somehow, whether it was ice, she was avoiding an animal, maybe she started falling asleep, passed out, who knows, spun her car so it was facing the wrong way in the right-hand lane.
Oh, I didn't know it was facing the wrong way.
Yeah, so I actually had to draw myself a picture. And so the road curves to the left, and then she somehow got her car to turn in the wrong direction in the right-hand lane.
It was icy that night, right?
I mean, I don't know, but I know there was probably at least a couple feet of snow.
Okay.
So now let's talk about before the crash. And there's a lot to talk about before the crash. And in order to try to understand where Maura was mentally, emotionally, and even physically, we need to look at the days prior to the disappearance. From what I researched, Fred, Maura's dad, was a hard ass, to say the least. He pushed his kids to be the best. According to the documentary where Maura's older sister Julie was interviewed, which, for the record, the documentary is called The Disappearance of Maura Murray, and Maggie Freeland, who is also a UMass grad, did an amazing job with. If I mention the documentary or Maggie, it is because I am referencing the documentary. Also, everything I use to research will be in the show notes so anyone can look for themselves, because we believe it is important for everyone to check facts and do their own research. So back to Julie. Julie said in an interview with Maggie that they never wanted to disappoint their dad. When Julie and Maura got accepted to West Point, it was a proud moment for many people. While at West Point, she met her boyfriend, Bill. She was studying chemical engineering, and so that's why it's interesting to hear what she did next. She stole from Fort Knox.
I mean, I feel like that's a goal for everybody to steal from Fort Knox at some point in their life, but
I mean, it's
I have a feeling it didn't go too well.
Yeah, no, it didn't. I mean, it's definitely not the first thing I think of that I'm going to do if I ever got to Fort Knox. So I definitely think it was one of those first situations that Moira was in that people should have been like, okay, what's going on with this girl? Because what she stole was interesting. It was nothing really of importance. like I said, I've never been to Fort Knox, but apparently it has like a department store where you can buy things.
Yeah.
So kind of like a convenience store.
Yeah, most bases have like a BX or a PX. It's a base exchange.
Well, and of course you would know because of your background.
I've been there a time or two, so.
Did some military things.
Yeah.
When Maggie interviewed Megan Sawyer, who was one of Moira's friends at West Point, she said that they walked out the store and military police grabbed Moira and confronted her. I can't imagine, like, all of a sudden you're walking out of a store and military police come up to you, which must have been frightening. Apparently she stole a couple small things like a lipstick and nail polish. And so Megan asked her why, which to me is a very logical question. And Moira said, I don't know, I had the money.
I have two comments about that. First of all, I was security forces in the Air Force, and we're not just waiting around for people who steal. What did she steal?
Like a nail polish and
a lipstick?
A lipstick,
something?
yeah.
So they must have been watching her, and maybe this wasn't her first time doing it. Because I feel like they wouldn't have responded that soon.
Yeah.
In my experience.
Well, exactly. I mean, because if they grabbed her like right as soon as they got out, I mean, she must have really suspicious behavior.
Yeah. Maybe they've been watching her for a while.
Yeah, it's very, very peculiar.
I don't know. Could be.
Maggie interviewed Kathleen, which was Moira's other sister, and she said that everyone wanted the incident to be hush-hush, which I can imagine the embarrassment that not only Moira, but the family would feel after an incident like that, so they probably wanted the transition to Umass to look different than it was.
Makes sense.
Because especially
I wouldn't
with their
blame
dad.
them.
Yeah, dad was a hard ass, and I mean, to have one of your daughters kicked out or something like that must have been a real blow. So when she got to UMass, she did not stop getting into trouble. According to a Missing Maura Murray podcast with Lance and Tim, on November 3rd, 2003, she got accused of stealing credit card information. Interesting thing is that she was not using it to buy big, outlandish things. She was buying food, like ordering a pizza and having it delivered.
That's so weird.
Yeah. According to Renner's book, a UMass student contacted Amherst police and said there were charges on her card that she did not make. When the police called the restaurants, they said the deliveries were made to Kennedy Hall. I wonder who lived at Kennedy Hall. Later on that night, one of the restaurants called the police back and said someone placed an order with that credit card number. So the police told them to go with the order and they would meet them at the drop-off.
Also, if you're going to order pizza with a credit card, maybe have it delivered to a different address. Maybe. And meet them there. I mean, that's a possibility.
And guess who came out of the building to claim that delivery?
I'm guessing Maura.
There's actually it's not really a mugshot because they didn't like take her into the station and do it, but they actually took a picture of her at Kennedy Hall and it's actually online. So if you look up pictures of Maura Murray, it's like a black and white picture of her against like one of those like brick walls. And she does not look very good. Moira's story to the police is she found the receipt on the ground with the credit card number on it, which I don't know about you, but when is a full credit card number on a receipt?
They used to be.
In 2004?
I am willing to bet they used to be, because where I used to work, they had the full credit card on there. It was only maybe a couple of years after that they stopped doing it.
So maybe she wasn't fibbing.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, I think that's like the first time I've heard that because between the podcasts and the reading I've done, I haven't seen anyone that's like, yep, that used to happen back in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
At least in Utah. I don't know about Massachusetts. You guys do things weird here. Just saying.
The police asked for the paper with the information on it, and Maura gave it to them, but it also had other number sequences on them. So she gave them the sticky, and apparently there was a bunch of other numbers on there, but she claimed they were her friends' phone numbers.
Right. Because phone numbers and credit cards look a lot alike.
Right.
You know?
When she talks to the police, she does not say much of why she did what she did. Maybe it was embarrassment, but she got probably the best outcome she could get because she goes before a judge, and the judge cuts her some slack and says, stay out of trouble for 6 months, and it goes off your record.
And this is her second offense.
I mean, the first one was a military one, so do they have those records?
That's what I was just wondering. Like, if they'd have access to them.
Yeah, because if they're like, all right, you know what, you're just not allowed to be here anymore, go on with your life, would it follow her?
You know, I'm not sure. I was a straight A.
Straight-laced.
I never did anything bad in my whole life.
I mean, if anyone listening knows, I'm very curious to know. But a short time later, she crashes her dad's new car. Yay, to get you in more trouble.
Wow.
So she crashes the car into a guardrail on the way back from a party.
But this wasn't her first car crash, right? Isn't that why she was driving her dad's car?
Maybe, maybe not. So there is a conspiracy around that her first accident might have had to do with a hit and run on Umass campus, but it's not been proven that that was Moira.
Oh, okay.
People are totally speculating on that. People are saying like, oh, she was part of that hit and run. That's why she was upset that night. That's why her boss at her job had to bring her back to her dorm, even though she said it was her sister she was sad over. And then that's why she did the crash up in New Hampshire, so she could have those crash marks on her car match a different accident. But that's not proven.
I was going to say that's a far stretch.
I think so. A lot of these conspiracy theories are very far-fetched. Let's give some context to what happened before she crashes her dad's car into a guardrail. On the Missing Maura Murray podcast on February 7th, 2004, which was a Saturday, she went car shopping with her dad to get her a new car. It seems like she's needed a new car because her dad was telling her to put something in her tailpipe, like a rag in her tailpipe. Yeah, which I had never heard before, but to keep it from rattling. Sounds like it was on its last leg. So they did not purchase one, but they met up with one of Moira's friends to have dinner. After dinner, they all go to the liquor store. Mind you, that dad's still with them. I don't know if I do that with my parent, but...
I mean, I wouldn't, but that's because they're Mormon and they don't drink, so...
There you go. So after dinner, they all go to the liquor store so that Moira and her friend can pick up booze for the party that night. It gets better because Moira then drops off Fred at his hotel and borrows his new car to drive to the party.
After she's already been drinking.
Probably having drinks at dinner, and then buys more liquor, and then goes to a party. Like, what?
So her dad knew she was drinking and buying liquor. Okay. That didn't cross my mind before.
But, like, why would you let your daughter borrow your car if she's going to a party to drink more? Then there's this next part, right? So if he was like, oh, yeah, just take it. I'll meet you in the morning, whatever. Fine. But then around 3 a.m, she says she had to return her dad's car, which there's so many things wrong here because why did her dad give her a car when he knows she's going to be drinking? Mm-hmm. And why did she have to bring it back that morning when she most likely had been drinking at this party?
Yeah. I'm wondering if there was a conversation or if she was, well, no, if they went to the liquor store, he'd know they were drinking.
Right.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it makes no sense to me, but
no.
I'm sure there's more of the story that we just don't know. Mm-hmm. So on her way to the motel, Moira crashes right into a guardrail. And again, I'm a very visual learner, so I'm painting an image for you guys to get a point of like where the road's going on. She gets to the end of this road, the guardrail's straight in front of her, and she can go left or right. There is no straight. And she literally goes straight ahead into the guardrail.
Okay, so she must have been
pretty inebriated.
Drunk, yeah.
She really got off again. She got no charges that night. I don't know how that worked out, but there's no charges. Mm-hmm. Another tidbit information. So on Tim and Lance's podcast, they talked about James Renner, who wrote the book, and how he called the police department and they had no comment about why they didn't do charges. So I don't know. I mean, I guess she could have been sober.
Yeah. But also, from the documentary, the family didn't really like the book that James Renner wrote. Correct?
No. And that's a very good point to bring up.
And maybe the police weren't really fond of him either. I don't know.
So for our listeners, James Renner, who wrote the book, was not well liked by the family. He let Fred Murray know he's going to be writing this book and he wanted this interview. And James actually sent Fred a copy of his book he wrote before the Maura Murray book. Oh. And Fred was not for it, which, in Fred's defense, I read the book. It's an interesting book. He paints the family in a different light. He's nicely put.
Wasn't he more into those conspiracy theories, though?
He did have conspiracy theories, but he had a lot of childhood trauma of his own and family trauma, and there's a lot of that seeped into the book.
So you think maybe he's projecting a little bit?
It might be.
Okay.
It sounds like he uses these true crime stories to almost self-medicate himself. To each his own. If you guys still want to read it, it was interesting, but I don't know if it was exactly a good reference for material.
And that's probably not the best way to deal with your childhood trauma.
Probably not. Absolutely. Tim and Lance on the podcast talked about what preceded the crash for a good part of their episode because there's so many possibilities for what probably happened. I cannot comfortably present any of the following as fact, but here's what maybe happened. Maura arrived with a tow truck at the hotel, and somehow she got into her father's room. So Fred claims that he did not know she was there until morning. So whether Maura got the attendant to let her in, or maybe Fred had given her an extra key, I don't know. But he woke up the next morning and his daughter was there. Tim and Lance could speak to the phone records, which are interesting. So there was a call made to Maura's boyfriend, Billy, from Fred's phone at 4:49 a.m. For Billy, it is a little earlier, so he was still part of West Point. He finally had a posting in Oklahoma. For him, this was earlier than 4:49 a.m. Did Maura borrow her dad's phone? Where was her phone? Or did Fred make the call?
Why would Fred make the call, though?
I don't know. It's one of those conspiracy theories.
I mean, unless they're buds, but if I remember right, they weren't really.
No, and in my findings, it looks like Fred had no problem with Billy, but Maura's sister said, get away from him, he's cheating on you, he's not worth it, it was a long-distance relationship, but they were going to get married,
Yeah.
And then there was also stuff about how, he didn't spend enough time trying to help find her, but what I think was a good point that got brought up was that the guy was still part of the military.
Yeah, it's not like he could just leave whenever.
Right, so you could speak this. If you have a leave, can you go over that leave without some kind of justification?
You would have to get approval to do it. I mean, it happens, but
it's probably not likely that it would have been able to happen.
yeah, it would. So many factors.
Yeah, so we can't really blame Billy on that front. According to Tim and Lance, on February 9th, 2004 at midnight, so this is the beginning of the day of the crash, phone calls were being made. Maura supposedly called Bartlett, New Hampshire to rent a condo, and the phone call lasted about 3 minutes, but no condo was ever rented.
How far is that from where she crashed?
I believe from what Tim and Lance were saying, it was actually a good distance away.
Like, was she on her way there, or was it completely out of the way?
I mean, it wasn't a direct route.
Oh, okay.
But for me, this is really starting to paint a picture of this does not sound like a girl that is trying to commit suicide or anything.
Yeah.
So later on that day, she emails her boyfriend, Billy, and in this email talks about how she does not want to talk to anyone, but she signs it, love ya, stud.
Okay.
And this was brought up as a point because it sounds like a friendly banter. Are they still together? Then there was talk about they weren't together, they were together, they weren't together. You know.
That could be both things.
It's college love. What do you want? 1:13 p.m., she leaves a message on a classmate's phone. Then after that, calls 1-800-GO-STOW, where the phone call lasts about 5 minutes, but it was a pre-recorded informational because Stow's phone lines were down.
Oh.
So they gave like information where you could stay, what you could do, but so apparently she listened to it. So it sounds like she's still trying to find, okay, what can I do when I'm up there? Maybe get away for a few days. An hour and 20 minutes after she emailed her boyfriend, she called him and they either spoke for a minute or she left a voicemail. So after saying she doesn't want to talk to anyone, then she tries to call him. Around 4 p.m., Maura emails her professors and says there was a death in the family. And I'm sure it says something along the lines, I'll be out for a couple days. And for the record, there was no family death.
Mm-hmm.
A friend that was actually interviewed on the documentary said she handed in her homework.
Yeah. Like if she was planning on taking her own life.
Or just disappearing, why would you hand your homework in?
Yeah. Why do more work?
Right, exactly. Why waste your time?
Yeah.
Before she left for New Hampshire, she packed stuff into boxes in her dorm and took her pictures off the wall. Maura was going through a lot, to say the least. We can only speculate what was going on in her head. What was interesting from both Maggie in her documentary and Renner's book was that they both retraced her steps from that day. So they both found about an hour discrepancy in time from when she left Umass.
Oh, Renner found that too?
Yes. It was about 45 minutes for him, which I thought was amazing to be able to put those side by side parallel and be like, oh my God, they found the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like from the time she left UMass, she ran a couple errands and then headed to New Hampshire, where she eventually crashed and went missing. According to Maggie, after she left UMass, Maura stopped at the bank, then the liquor store, and drove to New Hampshire. She then headed to the liquor store where she bought a box of red wine, Bailey's, and a 12-pack of wine coolers.
She didn't have any left over from the night before.
Just then there's another point, right?
I mean, but boxed wine, she knows how to party.
It's probably the cheap stuff.
You're not a fan of boxed wine. I can tell by the look on your face.
My mother always tells me don't go for the boxed wine. But I don't know. I'm more of a beer drinker than a wine drinker.
True.
Let's talk about after the crash.
All right. Let's do this.
Maura crashes the car, and on this road, it curves to the left. So her car was found facing the wrong way in the right lane. There are 3 eyewitnesses on the street. So you have the Westmans, the Marats, and the Atwoods. So crash happened around 7:27 p.m. because that is the time of the first 911 call by Faith Westman. At 7:30, Butch Atwood is driving home in his bus and notices Maura. Bush speaks to her and sees that she is shaken up. Maura refuses help, claiming that she called AAA, which she knew was not true because cell phone signal. 2 or 3 minutes later, he leaves Maura and drives the rest of the way home. Butch also had changed his statement a couple of times, which I think is interesting.
Butch, you don't do that.
Yeah, no. So 7:40, Butch or his wife calls 911, but the lines are busy, so he does his paperwork in his bus. 7:43 p.m., a dispatcher calls back and gets Butch's wife and says she does not know where Maura is. 7:46 p.m., Sergeant Cecil Smith arrives, and Maura is gone by that point. When the police went through her car, several of the wine coolers were empty or missing, and there was red wine all over the car from the crash, so that's why they think she was drinking.
So how long was it from the time of crash, the first 911 call, to Cecil Smith showing up?
Everything happens at 7:27, and they show up at 7:46. Almost 20 minutes, which I guess response time, I mean, especially if it's snowing, or can't imagine there's a lot going on in Haverhill, New Hampshire. But so Maggie from the documentary was able to see Maura's car. So since it was still in a car lot, they saw a Stop and Shop card, airbags were deployed, and they could see the dust from fingerprinting.
Isn't that crazy that it has been there? Because when did she do the documentary? 2018?
Yeah, sometime in because I think James Renner wrote his book around 2015. Yeah, that would make sense. It was around 2017.
So they kept her car for 14 years.
It's probably still there.
Yeah.
Because it's still an open crime scene.
Yeah, true. I was actually amazed when they had it. I'd never heard of that before.
And I was amazed they could see it. Mm-hmm. You know, I wonder what strings they had to pull to do that.
I think it was her buddy.
Oh, right.
The private investigator. That was a good documentary. I thought she did
I loved it. Mm-hmm. I thought it was very, very well done.
And very respectful of the family.
Very respectful. Had to ask some hard questions, but was very respectful in the way they did it. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of discrepancies because James Renner says one thing, and they said one thing in the documentary. So, I don't know. Maggie did get her hands on an official police list of items found in her car. And some things are interesting, so I haven't listed all of them, but I just put the ones in here that I thought were important. Shampoo, sleeping pills, deodorant, lotion, body spray, razor, makeup, birth control, candy, and school stuff. So that to me sounds like an overnight bag for a girl that just had to get away from life's bullshit.
Yeah, she's going on a trip. That's what I would think as well.
Absolutely. And even people are like, oh, well, she packed sleeping pills. I mean...
Who doesn't use sleeping pills?
Sometimes you
melatonin.
Need right, melatonin. I know, like Advil PM.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't specify that it's an actual, like, hard, not something
prescribed.
Exactly. 36 hours into the investigation, New Hampshire Fish and Game were called in, and they did a 10-mile circle radius around the crash, and they found no footprints or anything of interest.
I thought, and maybe this is later on in the story, were they the ones that brought the dog? I thought the dog caught a scent for a little ways up the road.
Yeah, so I don't know if it was New Hampshire Fish and Game, but 10 days after the crash, the cadaver dogs got called in.
Oh, okay.
Not sure why it was so late. 10 days just seems...
A little late.
A little late for a scent to still be there. I mean, I'm no expert on that. But they tracked Maura's scent for a small way down the road and then lost it. So according to Kurt, Maura's little brother, Lori, Maura's mom, could not help with the investigation due to having cancer. So she has since passed, and she died on her daughter's birthday.
Oh my God, no.
I know.
That's so sad.
It's sad.
Why does all this stuff happen to one family?
I know. So Fred, this is interesting. Fred did not sit down for a formal interview with police for almost 5.5 years. And when he did, he brought his attorneys with him.
Why not for 5.5 years?
I mean, that to me is very sus.
A little bit.
I mean, I don't know if it's because there were so many conspiracy theories by that point, and he's like, all right, I'm being accused left and right. I need to make sure that I'm not going to, I don't know, perjure myself.
He didn't talk to the police at all, or was it just a formal
I think it was a formal sit down. Fred also said that Moira had been depressed and maybe went off the trail and died. But then he since then said, okay, I wish I never said that.
Yeah.
So, like, did you know your daughter was depressed? Because why else would you say that?
Was there a term that he used to?
Squaw.
Oh, okay. That's what I couldn't remember.
Yeah, went into the woods and did a squaw. I've never heard that before, but apparently. Let's talk about some of these theories. And this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but these are just the ones that I could personally wrap my head around because some of them were too out there for me. Not meaning that they don't have a hint of truth to them, but Moira was driving in tandem with someone, and when the crash happened, she hopped over to their car.
I mean, that's a possibility, especially with what the dogs found.
What the dogs found, but was it someone she knew? Was it not someone she knew?
That's the question.
There was talk about people in town seeing her in stores. Was somebody with her? I mean, did she want to have a girls' weekend and then one of her friends isn't talking?
Wasn't there one of the witnesses in the home that mentioned seeing another person in her car that was smoking a cigarette?
I think that was Mrs. Westman. She had said she thought she saw what looked like the light up of a cigarette in Moira's car.
And
Moira was outside the car.
That these old people love sitting at their windows watching everything that happens.
That's what I don't understand. You have probably at least 3 to 4 people from different houses with different angles, and you're telling me you all turned the backs at the same fucking time. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I mean, even me, if there's something going out, I'm at the window watching.
Exactly.
Get my popcorn out,
Exactly. The back street near our house, there's tons of stuff that goes down. We have our noses out there all the time. I don't know. I mean, and then some people were willing to talk to people, others weren't. It depended on what time. I mean, some people, I think by the time the documentary happened, were like, because they couldn't interview any of those neighbors. Mm-hmm. And one being because Butch has already passed. He sounded like he died a very painful death since he had cancer. The Westmans wouldn't talk anymore.
They probably just had so many people come around.
Oh, I'm sure.
Want to tell the story.
And the family has that blue ribbon that's right at the crash. I'm sure is always a reminder of what happened. So who knows? So after the crash, Maura ran into the woods, scared of a DUI, which would be something else on her record, ended up dying in the woods. Which I don't think
But she was in shape, right?
She was in excellent shape, which I think is a very good point.
But also, I mean, how cold was the night? Could
Right.
she have died of her hypothermia?
I mean, honestly, we probably could look that up. What the temperature was on that night. Right?
I'm sure we could.
I mean, why not? Let's look it up and see.
After watching that documentary, I had all the theories that they discussed. It was easier to check some off of my list from what they were talking about. Because I know and you'll probably get to this one, the theory about the police officer who responded.
I do bring it. It's actually my third one.
Oh, perfect.
So if you want to talk about that.
There's a good segue.
Yeah.
I don't think they did, personally.
I don't think they did either. I mean, we never know.
I mean, from my armchair detective chair, I don't think they did.
Guys, I'm almost there. I'm sorry.
I mean, I'm surprised it's not in a report somewhere.
Okay, so February 9th, 2004, right? Mm-hmm. So it looks like the high was 40 and the low is -4.
So it's a possibility.
That's pretty cold.
Yeah.
I mean, especially since it was already 7 at night, because the day average temp was 18.
Okay.
So it was pretty cold.
So, I mean, there's a possibility she got lost somewhere in the woods.
Yeah, that would have been another tick on her record, too. Mm-hmm. Seems like she was already in enough trouble.
Yeah.
We don't think the police had anything to do with it, but that's a theory out there. Here's number 4. Moira got picked up by a stranger, whether willingly or against her will.
This is the theory that holds most weight for me.
I agree. I mean, she could have been, if she did stop in town, maybe someone saw her, saw she was inebriated, saw an opportunity.
Or just saw her as they were driving by, like on their way to work.
I mean, you can't get more isolated. I mean, really, it was a very, very isolated road that went to the middle of nowhere. Tons of woods on either side.
To me, I feel like it could have been a situation of opportunity. Like, oh, there she is. She needs help. She's cute. She's drunk.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't want to think about her that way, but you never know. The last one is Maura committed suicide. An empty pack of sleeping pills was found with a full pack in her car, but that could have just been being a college student and be like, oh, it's empty. I'm just going to throw it in the back seat.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I do stuff like that all the time.
Right. Oh, trash. Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's happened with Maura, but if anyone has any other details they would like to share, we would love to hear them. I just want to say I picked Maura because it's kind of a local case since we are from Massachusetts. It has been almost 20 years since Maura's disappearance. If you have any tips or information, please call the New Hampshire State Police. Don't contact us. If you really have some vital information, please contact the New Hampshire State Police. We will also link the FBI link to Maura's missing person profile, as well as the website that the family has to post updates about Maura.
Is that a Facebook?
No, it's actually like an actual website. Oh. And they have tons of pictures of Maura on there.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
So let's hope she comes home safely.
Or hopefully the family at least gets some closure, whether it's like just an answer. I feel like.
Absolutely. Because this is a long time to go without wondering what happened to your sister, your daughter, best friend.
She'd be my age right now.
Really?
A whopping 41. Isn't that crazy?
Time flies. Thanks for listening today. This show wouldn't be possible without our amazing producer and editor, Rob Fitzpatrick, who works tirelessly behind the scenes to bring you the best content.
And a special thanks to Taiga Soundprod for providing the captivating intro music, Cinematic Intro 24.
And of course, we can't forget the hauntingly beautiful outro music, Rhino's Theme, composed by Kevin MacLeod.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast platforms, like Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Your feedback means the world to us.
Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram for behind-the-scenes glimpses, updates, and more thrilling content. You can find us at Wicked Wanderings Podcast.
Thank you so much for listening and being part of our Wicked Wanderings community. We appreciate each and every one of you.
Stay curious,
keep exploring,
and always remember to keep on wandering.